This is Mind Your Mornings with Anna Chandy, a fortnightly podcast that takes you on the journey to a brave new you.
Hello and welcome to the second season of Mind Your Mornings. In this series, we will be looking at mental health from within. Now, there's a new wave of awareness here, and with it, a lot of questions. With the support of the team at Anna Chandy Associates and our gracious clients, we've decided to uncover some of the mysteries surrounding mental health. So together, let's explore various perspectives from people who have experienced therapy, from caregivers, and from therapists themselves. Perspectives from a decade ago to now, and from Gen X to Gen Z. Hi, I'm Brian, back again with another conversation to discover a new perspective from behind the therapy room. Today, we have two very special guests with us. Deepti Chandy is an associate counselor at Anna Chandy Associates. She has been practicing therapy for the last 2 years and is a TA trainee. And with her, we have Varun, who's a serial entrepreneur and the name behind some of India's most well-known brands. Varun is on his mental health journey and Deepti is his therapist. Varun has graciously accepted our request to be on this podcast and share his experience with us. In today's times, when therapy is still taboo, Varun has chosen to come forward and speak. We hope this creates a ripple effect that leads us to more acceptance and transparency around therapy. Varun and Deepti, thank you for being here and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Great. So let's get right down to it. Varun, tell me a little bit about yourself and your perceptions of therapy before you actually went in for therapy. What has your mental health journey been like?
So, I've been an entrepreneur most of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And being an entrepreneur, obviously, you see a lot of ups and downs, especially when it comes to mental health.
Right.
And I guess being an entrepreneur for such a long time, I kind of developed a lot of things that most entrepreneurs develop, but never really thought of it from a mental health perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I was one of those people who, like 6-7 years ago, thought that depression was a word made up by the ultra privileged, so they don't have to work.
Right.
And all of these things seem very frivolous to me, and I never ever thought mental health was actually something serious. Then in 2018, I think about in March, I launched my second startup,
Mm-hmm.
just called Grades Don't Matter. And the startup went crazy. We were number one on the Play Store, App Store. And then just suddenly I didn't feel like going to work anymore.
Right.
And I just could not, put a pin on it as to why I don't feel like going to work anymore. And I just didn't feel like doing anything. And I kind of tried to find answers, and I would just lie in bed all day, and days turned to weeks, weeks turned to months. And I kept thinking, what's going on with me?
Right.
And that is when I thought that, okay, maybe I should seek this thing called therapy and see what it's all about. The funny thing is, when I first went for therapy, I found it very absurd.
Right.
Because the therapist would ask you a bunch of questions which your friends can ask you.
Mm.
And they would like make you think about things which your friend can. So I thought, wait, why am I paying for this? Like, I can literally tell my friend to do all of this.
Right.
But then it's only now that I've come a full circle and I've been in therapy for long enough to I know not only the importance of it, but how much it can help you in life.
Sure.
So yeah, that's in short what my mental health journey has been like.
Right. We'll get down to really the journey after you've started seeking therapy. But what was your family environment like when it came to seeking support for mental illness or issues with mental health?
I really lucked out.
Right.
Because my parents not only support therapy, but they are very strong advocates of mental health. And I think that's something that I really lucked out, because when I was going through this, my mom strongly supported therapy. She strongly even looked for therapists for me.
Mm-hmm.
She even suggested, coming to therapy with me if that helped me be strong enough to handle it. So this is something that I really feel a lot of Indian parents don't do.
Sure.
A lot of Indian parents still think that if you're seeking therapy, you're mad or you've gone cuckoo. If I was to really describe therapy in a very, very simple way, like, Brian, let's assume you have an accident, right? And you break your leg. Now, if you break your leg, you are going to go to a doctor, right?
Of course.
And you are going to get it fixed. Now, because we can't see what's happening inside the mind, And we assume that because we can't see it, that everything is all right.
Right.
But what if your mind breaks in a small way? You need to go to a doctor and you need to fix it. And that's what therapy is for. You're going and fixing it, and there's no way around. And I feel most of us are walking around with broken legs in our mind. They're not getting it fixed. And because they're not getting it fixed, the issues compound. And as the issues compound, it gets into something more serious.
Right. That's very well put, Varun. Varun made a very important point about the family support that he received when he wanted to seek therapy. Now, Deepti, can you talk a little bit to that point? Do you see that as common thread? When I mean the common thread, the family support, do you see that as a common thread amongst your clients?
No, actually, I think when Varun said he lucked out, I think he is absolutely right, because not everyone is supportive. A lot of kids, when I say kids, they're adults, but they still share. They don't share exactly what's going on, of fear of being judged. Or I think parents take it very personally as well, that we did something wrong, which is causing them to be in therapy, or our kid isn't strong enough. They need support externally.
Right.
So I think these are some of the examples. And I see a couple of kids from the same family system. In fact, I have, brothers and sisters who are in therapy, where the parents are constantly asking me, what did we do wrong? And so I think Indian parents in our cultural context, and I don't want to make a general statement, but they do tend to take it a bit personally. So Varun is lucky, and his mom has been extremely supportive of his journey.
Right.
Yeah.
But why do you think some parents are more supportive, or some parents are supportive and some parents balk at their children going for therapy?
I think it's very subjective, but I think if you've sort of had some idea or exposure to mental health, then you are more supportive. And I think any parent, if they understand, how dark it can be in your mind, that would probably really help them understand what their child is going through.
Sure. Now, Varun, therapy is very personal to the individual. When Deepti asked you if you wanted to talk about your journey, what made you say yes?
I didn't actually really want to, talk about my depression or, what I've gone through. But when I lost my younger brother to COVID last year, and when that happened, the number of people who reached out to me and asked me, how do I cope with this? And I'm going through so much grief and I just can't handle it. And that is when I realized there are so many people out there who just can't express themselves because of societal conditioning or probably a toxic family setup or whatnot. And I realized this is such a need of an hour, where not only should we normalize therapy, we should make it more accessible, but we should also remove the taboo around it. And the last 6 months, I have been debating with Deepti, should I talk about it? Should I not talk about it? Being an entrepreneur, these are not things that you just go out openly and speak about. But I remember there was this one girl who wrote to me and she said she's just not able to get through life and she doesn't know what's wrong with her. And obviously when she told me what she's going through, it's clear symptoms of depression. And she didn't even know that there is someone called a therapist who can help. And she thought this is it and it's over. And I thought there may be so many people like her all across India. And I thought if somebody like me, especially I feel like a guy opening up about depression and talking about feelings and talking about all of that stuff, where, in a male-dominated society,
right,
the man is not supposed to speak about any of this. I thought that would create a lot of conversations.
Right.
And that's the reason why I decided to open up. And yeah, it was not easy, but I've become so comfortable with therapy and I've accepted my depression to such a level
Right.
where for me now, this is just a thing of the past and something that I've gone through. And I don't think there's anything wrong with what happened to me.
Deepti, why did you choose Varun as one of the clients that you'd wanted to come out and, have this session with on the podcast?
I think there are two main reasons. One is, I think in terms of what society sees as successful, he had cracked that, but yet he was also experiencing something which is so contradictory, and which is what people constantly say. You have everything, you're successful, you're X, Y, Z, and you still are going through something, and they can't understand that. So that was the first reason. The second is he's extremely articulate, and the way he writes or shares or is able to put out what he's gone through and his experience. I think to be able to share that gives a lot of clarity to other people. And also he's really, really worked very hard through this process. through very, very trying times. Like he mentioned, the loss of his brother, and I've seen him be consistent. And I think these were three things that really, made me say that I would like him to share his experience.
I think that's a very strong point that Deepti mentioned. That I remember, I think about 10 years back, seeing this movie called Pyasa. It's one of the most iconic movies ever made in Indian cinema. The movie's from the 50s, made by Guru Dutt. It's about this really successful filmmaker who kind of at his peak is obviously a married man, but then falls in love with one of his co-actresses. And then in the confusion, both of them end up leaving him, and he ends up spiraling down depression, alcoholism, and eventually, commits suicide. And the movie bombed, obviously. And when they asked the director, why did the film fail? He said, the public couldn't fathom the fact that somebody so successful or somebody, who had everything in life could actually feel sad, could actually feel depressed.
Right.
And I think that's one of the major myths that we need to break. That just because you've reached somewhere doesn't mean that, you can't be sad or depressed.
We'll come to the myths that you'd like to address, Varun. But I just want to take you back to the time that you first opted to take therapy. What were your expectations like, and what was that journey like? Did it make you uncomfortable? Has the journey been uncomfortable at any point? Coping with feelings that perhaps you had not really dealt with?
So I think my expectation from therapy was I'm just going to go there and there's going to be like some magic fix. And then after 1 or 2 sessions, I'm just going to be all right. And because there's such a taboo around it, that's why nobody goes. But if you actually end up going, you're going to be all right in a matter of days. But I soon realized that that's not how it works. And when I first went for therapy, I realized that it opened a lot of scars from the past.
Right.
That is when I realized that you need to be prepared to go for therapy. Why? Because the first 3 to 6 months are going to be the hardest. You're going to confront things from your past that you never thought you're going to confront. You're going to be taken into places you never thought you would be taken. And it's only when you visit those places and come to acceptance with those situations can you find peace with them. So it was very uncomfortable. It was very taxing. And it was not something that I was prepared for at all. And it's almost like you reach a stage where you don't want to share more because you know your therapist is going to take you deeper into that and help you with it. So it reaches a stage where I'm like, okay, I don't want to share more because this is really giving me so much pain.
Right.
That's when I quit therapy because I decided, okay, this is not something I can handle. It's too much. And I didn't go for it for almost a year and a half. Biggest mistake I made because I realized that you can't run away from something that is, like I said, right, when you break your leg, you can't run on a broken leg. And that's when I came to Deepti and restarted the process. But this time I was stronger to accept what I was going to go through.
Right. Deepti, can you address that point about mental health being a journey that people need to keep revisiting rather than look at it as a, quick fix once, just go there and everything will be sorted out. Can you take us through that part?
I think, that is one of the biggest myths, especially I think in our generation, that people think that you just come for 1 or 2 sessions, there's a surface issue, there's a breakup, there's something, you discuss that and you're done. What they don't realize is it's exactly like an onion. You're peeling and peeling and peeling. And the deeper you go, the more you're able to embrace and, confront. And it takes a lot of strength and resilience to do that. And of course, finances as well. So it's 2 things. One is, do you have the strength to go there? And do you have the financial support to also go there? So I think, that is probably, for me, one of the reasons why people may not stick to that entire duration of what would be most beneficial to them, because it's scary in the beginning. And it's like when you put Dettol on your wound first, it burns for a minute, but then it's going to help you and you're going to then realize that, okay, it's going to help. But in that first ouch, you just want to run away.
Right. Varun, do you recall what you felt after your first session? Many people describe the feeling as being light and calm, while some come out feeling even more skeptical. What was going through your mind and how was that evolution?
For me, when I started therapy, I expected like quick results. I expected everything to happen very quickly, but unfortunately it didn't. And that is why probably I think one of the most important things is to find the right therapist. there are no bad or good therapists. There are right therapists. What may work for me may not work for you.
Right.
So it's not like I'm saying some therapists are bad or some therapists are good. But I think the most important thing to find a therapist, at least a one-size-fits-all barometer, is how much empathy they have. And that's what I found with Deepti when I started my session with her. The beautiful thing was, like, I'm not saying that this is right, but I could have killed a person and gone to her and said, I've done this. And she would be like, okay, tell me why this happened. And let's go deeper into it. Right. And I felt like that's the true test of finding a great therapist. Right. How much of your deepest, darkest secrets can you open to them without them judging you for anything? And that is when things started to change for me. When I felt so comfortable that this person is not only not judging me, she's genuinely trying to help me.
Right.
And I think that's the breakthrough that most people who are going for therapy should look for.
Right.
Where the therapist is so empathetic, they genuinely, really, really are not judging you for your deepest, darkest secrets, but are actually trying to help you get through that.
Right.
And once that started happening is when I started enjoying therapy. Because now I'd found an outlet where I could really let out whatever was going on in my mind and whatever was stuck inside for the last so many years.
Right.
And which is why I feel, to get through therapy, please find a therapist who is absolutely empathetic and not judgmental to anything that you say.
Right. Deepti, how important is that point about getting your clients to really open out, and how do you take your clients?
I think as a person, I've had my fair share of ups and downs. So I think empathy perhaps comes from that space where I know what that dark place
Do you
can
go
be
for
like.
therapy yourself?
Of course. So, and I think any good therapist should be in therapy themselves, should be in supervision as well, to make sure you're doing the right kind of work. You're not having any transferential issues or anything from your client story sort of rubber banding onto you. And I think it's also so important to be equal. I'm not one up. I'm not better than my client, but I probably have some skill set and I can help them get to that space. So I think for me, that's most important. And I think empathy, in fact, I was just reading that it actually causes changes in your physical body. Neuroscience actually supports limbic resonance happens in your body, and oxytocin is released when you feel empathy. So it's super important for me. How do I get my client there?
Yeah.
I don't know. Non-judgmental, and I think just being there with them in that moment, I guess.
Right.
That's a very, very important point where you can say, why can't just my friends be my therapist?
Yes.
Or why can't I just read books about it?
Right.
Your friends are eventually going to judge you for something that you've done. Or, you yourself are going to judge yourself for something you've done. Also, I've seen therapists who fake empathy.
Right.
It's either there genuinely or it's not there. Right. And that is why you cannot bypass therapy with something else.
Got it.
Because the essence of therapy is empathy. And that comes from, like Deepti said, her experience and her studies and, a whole gamut of things.
Sure.
That just can't be learned in a day.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting, the sort of myth-busting section here. What are some of the other myths that you would like to address through this conversation?
Well, one thing is therapy is expensive, and then why should I go for it? I don't think therapy is expensive. Therapy is the cheapest investment that you can make for a better life. How much would you buy like a new phone for? 1 lakh, right? You can almost do 6 months of therapy in that. So think of therapy as the greatest education you've ever had. It probably, I feel it's going to help you more than all your college education combined. Because if your mind is right, you can do anything in this world.
Right.
And it's just so important because therapy helps you take the right decision for yourself. It helps you live a much more meaningful life. It helps you close out all of those unresolved conflicts in your head. And it genuinely gives you what I feel is the most important aspect to human happiness is freedom. Because I feel the biggest prison in the world is between your 2 ears. And if you can open that up and be free of that, I think that's the greatest freedom. And I think that's what therapy brings. Second is parents saying that their children need therapy because they're going out too much or they're drinking too much or all of that. I mean, mental health disorders are a result of a lot of conditioning, upbringing, childhood issues, traumas. They are going out drinking and all of that to forget all of this. And that is why you telling them to wake up early, or you telling them to stop being on the phone, or you telling them to not go out drinking with their friends, that is their coping mechanism for what they're going through.
Right.
So maybe that's the first sign that they should go for therapy. And the third myth I really want to bust is, just because you go for therapy does not mean you're cuckoo or there's something wrong with you. A lot of people just go for therapy because it's mental fitness. And it really, really keeps you up to date with what your mind seeks, because the mind is constantly growing. And I think with therapy, you become more self-aware. What do you really want from life? Because as Deepti said, we have so many layers because of our conditioning. We may not want to be the people we want to, but we are because of the things around us. Therapy helps remove those layers.
Right.
And it helps you make you more pure in the mind.
No, I just want to take off from what Varun said.
Yeah.
I think, in fact, he does that with me week on week. He says, okay, this week, let's work on this. Or we've reached here. As we peel, he says, okay, let's work on this. And of course, it's for people who can afford to continuously be, explore, etc. And I think it is the best investment. I think it's a life hack to really know yourself. But I also think, I think a client mentioned to me that, why do you go to the dentist every month? You want to clean your teeth. You don't need to go to the dentist every month. You can stay without it. But you go. And I think coming to therapy is also like that. You're cleaning up your mind, mental fitness. I totally agree with that as well. And I also think that the second thing he said about, if you're in therapy, that means there's something off with you. As therapists, we're all in therapy. It doesn't mean that there's something off with us. So I think these are very, very important myths that we need to address.
Right. Now, coming to you, Varun, what were 3 big insights you got from therapy personally?
The most important thing I got from therapy is self-awareness. It's such a simple word, but I think it's literally the key to anything in life. I didn't know this word self-awareness. I just went with the flow.
Right.
And I realized that there's so many aspects of yourself you have no idea about. And that's what therapy took me. And it made me realize that, that there are different versions of me inside me that now I can recognize very easily. There is a child inside me that I can recognize very easily. And also it made me more aware of what I truly want. But I think the greatest thing that therapy does, it peels away your conditioning. Especially I'm not trying to be stereotypical, but the Indian conditioning is very strong. Extremely strong when it comes to work, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to family setup, when it comes to love. I didn't know anything about something known as the attachment theory, where how we attach ourselves to our partners, friends. And I was shocked, and I was like, oh, this is my attachment style and I need to work on it. So I discovered so many different new things about myself. And this has literally got nothing to do with depression. This is like basic stuff, which anybody can just go for therapy and realize, wow, these are the things that's causing me problems in my life. And the more are these simple things that you fix is when the deeper problems automatically start getting fixed.
Yeah. Would you say that you finally learned to accept yourself, and there's an element of self-love as well?
So Deepti and I had this conversation as to if we can pinpoint one common issue amongst all the clients who've ever gone for therapy, and that is low self-worth. And low self-worth is the primary reason for most issues: internal conflicts, relationship issues, family matters, control. And if you can solve your low self-worth problem, then pretty much a lot of issues can get solved. Now imagine if you take this low self-worth issue and solve it more on a national, on a political level. We're not going to have wars. We're not going to have people fighting each other, because you've solved the most important thing, which is ego fighting each other, right? So I think that's what therapy does. It solves the problem of low self-worth. And the day you become accepting of yourself, no matter who you are, what you are, how you are, is when finally, I think there is that nirvana moment and there's that peace of mind.
Great. Was that your experience as well, Varun? Did you immediately start feeling better? And you started your therapy sessions during the pandemic, didn't you?
I did. And also, anybody who's listening to this podcast, nobody's going to start feeling better immediately after therapy. And if you do, then you're, like Deepti said, you're just addressing a very surface level issue. Also, a therapist will not tell you what to do, but will help you find answers to a lot of your problems. One of the things which I think, just not me, but a lot of people have, is a very strong inner critic that is constantly criticizing them, right? It's like we don't even need a strict mom or an aunt. Like it's right inside us and saying you're worthless, you're hopeless. Call this the bully syndrome, where we don't bully others, but we end up bullying ourselves the most. So what Deepti said is become aware whenever that critic talks, right? Now, she didn't tell me tell the critic to stop talking, right? She told me become aware the next time what the critic says, and then we can discuss that in the next session. And then when we started discussing what the critic is talking about, it led to another breakthrough where, okay, fine, this is where the problem is coming from, and this is what the thing is. And then slowly that critical voice started receding.
Right.
So that's how therapy works, right? So a therapist is not going to be telling you, oh, why are you listening to your critical voice? Just tell it to shut up. That doesn't happen that way. And if you talk to your friend and tell them this is my problem, your friend is just going to say, just stop listening to your inner critic.
Yeah.
That's not how your mind works. The funny thing is, I think even though we've evolved so much, the problem that I see, especially in the 21st century, is that we think that the human mind is so simple. It's one of the most complex things in this universe. And yet we make it sound that it's so simple that we'll tell it to switch off or shut off, and it will. It can't.
Right.
And that's what I think therapy addresses, is that your mind is not so simple. It's one of the most complex organs in history of evolution, right? It's the most advanced organ in the history of evolution. So we should treat it like that.
Right.
So this self-love thing, right? It's a very interesting thing because, Deepti would just not stop talking about it. Like first she would say, okay, you're lacking self-love. Then I would show her, oh, look, I did this, I did that. Now I have self-love. And she's like, no. And then she'll point out some other thing, and I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have self-love. and it's so funny. The Instagram version of self-love is going on a holiday, or like getting a massage or going to the spa. And it's only when I started my sessions with Deepti, I'm like, okay, I really need to get to the bottom of what this self-love thing is. Everybody seems to be talking about self-love, but what is really self-love? And the more deeper I got into it and the more we discussed with Deepti and all of that, is self-love is something that comes obviously with resolving a lot of trauma that you may have encountered in the past, to come to a state where you are accepting yourself the way it is, right? With no judgment, absolutely no judgment. And you think of yourself as, not only able, but you're proud of yourself, even if you have no achievements, or even if you have, you're not accomplished anything in life. So to be able to do that sounds very easy, because if I just tell you, oh, you should just be accepting of who you are. But trust me, I had to go through so many layers of feeling, she would first take me to my childhood, and then she would take me to my teenage years, and then she would take me to my work years. And she's like, okay, did you realize that this has caused a lot of damage to your self-love? That is when I realized that self-love is not as simple as they make it sound on Instagram. So you're not going to be able to get self-love by following these Instagram psychologists.
Right.
It can only be solved, by dwelling deep into your past and by going for proper therapy. Self-love itself has so many layers. For example, there is something known as self-efficacy, there is self-confidence, there is self-esteem. And all of these form a part of self-love. And I was talking about it earlier that we kind of figured that low self-worth is probably one of the main problems, I think, of the modern civilization and root cause of what we all do. If we become more accepting of ourselves, I really think then Putin wouldn't have invaded Ukraine. So I think self-love, surprisingly, is the answer to most problems of the 21st century, right? And one of the biggest things that's going to plague this planet is hyper-hustle culture, right? Where we are moving so fast technologically. And if you look at the root cause of it, it's like, I want more, I want more, I want more.
Right.
But if you really have enough self-love, you'll be like, I'm content with what I have.
Yeah.
And then I may think I may want more. So I think self-love is not only the answer to a lot of problems in the 21st century. The only way to get self-love is through therapy, because it's not as easy as it looks. It took me 3 years to figure out what self-love is.
Deepti, when you look at Varun sharing all of this and sharing these nuances about mental health, you've been with him onward through his journey. How do you feel looking back on the journey and looking back on how the place that Varun has reached?
I'm smiling because I'm really, really proud of where he's reached. And I have to say that when we had our very first session, he was in a very, very bad place, Varun. I
Yeah.
mean, if it's okay for me
Yeah,
to
I know,
say
I
that.
agree. Yeah.
And so I feel so proud because he's been so consistent. And we've had really difficult conversations. We've had confrontations. When I say confrontations, I mean in the therapy room. He has allowed me to take him to some really dark spaces. He's been very, very, very open about it. And he's really pulled himself from there. He may be successful as an entrepreneur, but I can tell you that his resilience as a human being is far greater. And I saw even through, such a huge loss of his younger brother, how he was rallying around to, be there for other people. He in fact asked me, can you do sessions for people who are struggling? That's why we actually did, these open sessions, which were complimentary for people who were suffering because we wanted to give back. Even through that crisis, he, was thinking, how can this help other people? Because it's helped me. And I think that's really, really powerful. And he's using his voice to really share. It's great. He can say, this has helped me. I can carry on. I can, build the next startup, do really well. And he's reached that space where he's, super motivated and, he's on top of his game. But he's also saying, no, I want to share so that even if one other person can benefit, it's almost like he's paying it forward. So I feel extremely proud. And I think his resilience is something that I have learned from, and his ability to stick through it, through the dark conversations, through the difficult conversations. It's been my absolute privilege to see that.
Where
Thank
does
you,
that
Deep.
come from, Varun? This ability to now be at a place where you want to give back and you want to contribute and you want to be there for others.
When I was in this place, I can tell you it's the darkest place I've ever seen in my life. It's not only the darkest place, it's something where you think you can never get out of. And if somebody like me, who's gone through so many challenges in life, feels that I can't get out of it, I can only imagine how others might feel. That is when I realized that this is a conversation that has to be spoken about. I did put up a post about depression, and there were so many people who wrote to me saying, how do I get therapy? What do I do? It's not only started a lot of conversation around people. I think if I can get more, I mean, it's not anything to do with sexism, but if I can get more men into therapy, I think that itself will solve a lot of problems.
Right.
Because men not only do not express their feelings, they think it's weak to talk about their feelings. And I think it's high time that men not only come to terms with their feelings, but kind of go for therapy, because that helps reduce the toxicity of the environment they may end up creating around them. And I know that because I did a lot of that when I didn't know anything about mental health, and I inadvertently created a lot of toxic environment around me. But now that I'm aware, I know I can never do that again. So I think men going for therapy is also something that is extremely crucial, because even all the messages that I would get on Instagram would be mostly from women. And I'd be like, why aren't the men speaking up and saying, oh, I need this. I am going through shit.
Sure. I think you're calling for men to step up.
Yeah.
So just to conclude, if you could pass on one piece of advice to your generation, what would that be?
Well, it's literally very simple. You see all these stories about hustling, entrepreneurship, FOMO. Then you see all these stories about, trying to become more successful, trying to become more happy. You see all these stories about everybody trying to get somewhere, because that's what our culture has become, right? And you see everybody trying to emulate each other or kind of beat each other. I say, when you buy a car, there'll always be a better car. When you buy a house, there'll always be a better house. When you make enough money, there'll be always someone with more money. So I think the only way to find contentment in life is to find your purpose. And to be able to find your purpose, I think the only way is to go for therapy, because that leads to self-awareness, and self-awareness leads to purpose, and purpose leads to contentment, and contentment leads to peace.
Fantastic. That's brilliantly put. Any advice from you, Deepti, in the context of this conversation, but overall to our listeners?
I think Varun put it really well, but I get asked this question a lot. Am I the only person feeling this? And I think you aren't the only person feeling this in our generation, because of social media and social media comparison. We tend to think, what is the other person doing? Are they doing better? What am I doing? But if you can just turn that lens inwards and sort of look inwards and get to know yourself better, I truly believe that's a life hack because that'll take you through any crisis.
Thank you, Deepti, and thank you, Varun, for coming here and for sharing your personal journey with us. It's not always easy to recount our own journeys, and that too with so much honesty, vulnerability, insight, nuance. So wish you both the very best ahead. Thank you all for listening. I think it was a very engaging conversation. We had some fantastic insights from both Varun as well as from Deepti. Varun's journey is clearly phenomenal for a number of reasons, but mostly I think because of the place that he has reached, because of how vulnerable he's allowed himself to be, and also how aware he is of what the Varun of today is. Despite what people around him have said or believed, he chose his path which has led him to where he is today. Varun has taken a big step towards normalizing therapy in his life and through his conversation today. And I hope that one day we all recognize that therapy is for all of us, people like Varun and people like you and me.
This is Mind Your Mornings with Anna Chandy, a fortnightly podcast that takes you on the journey to a brave new you.